topic today was 1% improvement. So it's about making small changes, and we're talking about batch cooking today. So we're exploring a little bit more about how to use your Eat Love app to batch cook. But we also talked a little bit today about eating with the family, doing potlucks, having food ready for potlucks. Having kind of a go-to potluck recipe is always a good idea. And then you can, everybody brings their go-to. You can become famous for your potluck recipe. So that's always fun. Meal planning is something that is good to work with your family if you have people. It reduces resentment when, sometimes cooking falls on to one person. And so it's actually a really good idea to get your family involved, and so that you're not feeling that sense of resentment if you're the one, if the responsibility tends to land on your shoulders. That can actually cause a lot of distress and trouble. Teaching, cooking is good for everybody. Spouses of people who haven't, if a spouse hasn't cooked their whole life and then they don't have your support anymore, say if you pass away or what have you, they need to know how to cook for themselves. Or children or teenagers, they need to know how to cook when they launch. So learning how to cook is really important. Also, cooking is good because you're more likely to choose wholesome, healthy foods when you're cooking. But that also doesn't mean that you can't, say, order pizza, but also have like a side salad to go with the pizza. So you don't have to feel like you have to home cook all the time, every day. Or you could get half the job done with like a HelloFresh or some sort of food delivery company. I just happen to use HelloFresh, but there's others out there where they, do some preparations. And I have to admit, my go-to potluck meal is sometimes I just grab the kale salad with cranberries, and I just take the bag and then mix it there because, maybe I just came off of work and I just didn't have time to do a potluck meal. So, we talked a little bit today about, taking it easy on ourselves. We can have very high expectations on ourselves and be struck with, perfectionism. And food tracking and paying and meal planning can be a trap for getting too much into the perfectionism of food. And there's a crazy little thing that happens in our minds or brains when we focus a lot of attention on food. So with calorie counting or meal planning or this or that, is that we actually can stimulate an appetite that maybe wasn't necessarily there if we start thinking too much about food or spending too much food time thinking about or preoccupied with food. So what is really good is to set limits on how much time you spend planning and thinking about food. But you still need to do it because, a lot of like food, or sorry, a lot of problematic eating stems from not being prepared or not having access to the food that you need or want. So some food planning, some meal preparation is pretty important. So spending some time doing that, but then, closing the door on that and moving on to other things and thinking about other things until it's time to eat, and then coming back and enjoying the food that you actually are eating. So I've been loving seeing the foods that have been posted, that have been prepared and posted onto Facebook, and it's been so much fun kind of stepping into your world and seeing what you're up to. Back to the screen share. One problem with Eat Love is that it tends to be very American centric. So you might find that the scanning function doesn't work very well for Canadian foods, first of all, in the first place. And the other thing is it's kind of hard to find brands. So say if you were to swap this out and try to look and find your a Canadian ingredient. So we used bread. And when we searched for bread, we found that there weren't too many Canadian brand names, but if you go into this brand name food section, you'll get a collection of foods that are brands that are related to what you've searched. So, for example, if it's say if you wanted to make the bread, you would choose recipes, And so that will reduce the number of results by going into just the recipes. If it's in a collection, you may have started a collection, or it's in one of the collections that I've created for you, you would find it there. And ingredients might be a place to take a look, because it will really narrow down the search results. So that might be helpful in terms of finding, say, just a whole wheat bread. Now, when you select a whole wheat bread, you can always take a look at this whole wheat bread and then compare it to your label. And if it's somewhat close, again, we have to make sure that we try to avoid perfectionism here. So if it's, it's a 90-calorie bread and you found this whole wheat bread that's 86 calories, that's probably pretty close. Now, if it was like a 100-calorie bread, you could always just increase it and then get it a little closer to what it is. But again, don't worry about it being perfect. Just approximate. Get good at approximating. So if it's within 10 to 20%. Now remember, food manufacturers only have to have their food labels accurate to 20%. So the label that you're getting isn't even that accurate. So who knows? We're just approximating. We're just using it as a tool. So now we've changed this to whole wheat bread. I wanted to go back and we did a little just reminder about how the alarm system works. So there's a little warning here, as you can see where my cursor is. And if you take a look at that cursor, you're going to see why it's giving you this warning, how it doesn't fit your prescription. Now, again, with this theme of perfectionism, we want to be careful that if these are very small numbers, say if it's 1 or 2 grams of protein, fat, or carbohydrates outside of your prescription, that's okay. Just let it go. Your other meals will adapt to it, and hopefully by the end of the day, you should have about what your prescription says. It's a large difference, like 12 grams of protein is pretty large difference, then you could just go ahead and add a dish. And now when you select the smart choices, it should get you into the range. There you go. So we talked a little bit about favoriting your recipes, and so you can see there's a little heart. If it's got a black background, it's a little harder to see, but you can just add that to your favorite, and so it will start to remember your favorites, and the system becomes a little bit easier to use over time. And so one thing about manipulating your meal plan is you can expand it into this computer-sized view. We talked about how you can batch cook. So in this case, when we change the recipe, there's a couple ways to skin the cat here. You can either batch cook, or you can just change the servings. So when you go into here, you can change this to any number of days. So it started out as 1 day, and then when you do the batch cook, you can batch cook it for more days. You could batch cook it for 2 days for 2 people, for example. And then you're going to find that your leftovers will show up here. So that's good. Now, if you don't feel like having this as lunch or as dinner, you can always just grab it and move it and stick it into lunch there. Now, the other thing you can do here is we talked a little bit about my 4x4 rule. I'm just going to put it back. So say, for example, we want to make enough recipe for 4 days. You can have food, healthy food, almost every day of the week if you do this system. So make 4 servings of your food. So make enough of this recipe for 4 days. You save this. And then what you can do is you can freeze 2 of these leftovers, and you can reschedule these leftovers to, the following week. Let's put that one there. And then this one, I'm going to reschedule it to the week after that. So let's put that one into August. There. So now what we've got is we've made 4 servings, and 2 of the servings you'll have this week. Maybe you don't want it exactly the next day, but maybe you'll have it for lunch in a couple days. And then you've got your other 2 servings in the following weeks. You see, so there's one there, and then again in August. Now, if you did this every week and you batch cooked 1 meal every week, you would start to accumulate foods in your freezer, eating either something that you ate that week, something fresh, or you would have something from your freezer. So you can do that. And that's only cooking once a week. So that's the beauty of batch cooking, is that you can do that. Now, another feature of this meal planning system is that you can actually repeat meals. Sometimes foods don't feel like they're appropriate to repeat. So I picked this one for that reason, because this isn't something that you would want to batch cook. You'd want to serve your fresh vegetables each day. You'd want to cut them up, and then you would want, well, you might cut up a couple days worth of fruit and vegetables, but you probably would want to toast the English muffin and add the cottage cheese on the day that you're serving it. So in this case, I wouldn't necessarily want to batch cook it, but what you could do, go into your menu and just repeat the meal. And repeating meal is great for things like breakfasts or snacks, and you don't have to have it repeated for breakfast. You could actually buy enough English muffins and cottage cheese, fruit, and carrots for several eating opportunities. So you could have it for snack one day, you could have lunch for another, and maybe on Friday night when you're super tired and you don't want to cook dinner, you could have it for dinner, you know, so something like that. And so when you save it like that, you're going to find that it's going to populate into these different sections here. So if you move something into a section that already has a meal already in there, it's going to give you two options. It's going to either replace, or you actually can swap, or you can combine. So, so that's kind of a useful tool for when you're using this meal planning software. So if you were intending to combine it, you can just go combine with, or replace with, or swap. So let's just say we wanted to combine it. So now you're going to have this particular snack is going to have all of those things in there, or sorry, the breakfast here. So you can open that up. We reviewed logging meals a little bit, and we talked a little bit about if logging meals is your top priority, and you know, the Practice Better is a little bit easier for when you have labels to scan, because Practice Better is scanning better for labels, but you can get a nutrient analysis on both systems. We keep on selecting new recipes and trying them out. You can now work using your meal plan a bit better. It does take a little bit of time to get familiar with using the Eat Love system, but with time it gets a little bit easier. And as you favorite things, as you create your own recipes and you start repeating familiar foods, it's going to get a whole lot easier to use the app. So don't get discouraged on that. And this week or next week we're going to be working on goal setting, and so we talked a little bit about when you're goal setting, you want to pick something to focus on that is more specific. You know, Eat Love's tracking a whole bunch of different things, because we would have set up your prescription based on a number of nutrients and settings, but you don't need to worry about everything. It doesn't have to be perfect. There was another thing that came up in class today, is that sometimes you're going to have days where you have less of this or less of that. And really, it's over the whole week that we want to be looking at. Those are probably better goal setting metrics than just a day-by-day assessment. Okay. So you can always make up, like say if you didn't eat very much calcium this day and that's your goal, you can always eat a little bit more calcium the next day, and over the week it should average out. So that's something to think about. So next week we're going to talk a little bit more about goal setting, and you know, so you think about what matters to you, and to help you to do that, what I've done is set up worksheet for you, and it's called Examining Your Why. So it really helps a lot to understand why you want to do this, to help, you know, keep that motivation up, that level up, and so that it's so that you can focus on your goals. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that next week. Anyways, happy eating, and keep posting on the Facebook group. I really appreciate the posts and love seeing the food that you're making, and we'll see you then. Bye.